My wife kept taking the same Uber every night. So one night, I followed it, and my life ended. My marriage ended the night my wife ordered an Uber and smiled at her phone in a way I'd never seen before. I didn't know that yet, of course. Back then, in that exact moment, I was just a tired husband on the couch, one sock half on, watching my wife across the room and thinking, man, how did I get this lucky? My name's Mark. I'm 36, born and raised in Ohio, now living in a quiet little suburb outside Denver. If you'd met me a year ago, you'd probably say I was one of those guys whose life turned out pretty solid. Not flashy, not movie-level dramatic. Just good. I had the basics. A decent job as a project manager. A small but comfortable 3-bedroom house with a maple tree in the front yard. A 10-year-old golden retriever named Moose, who thinks he's still a puppy. And Emily. Emily was my wife. Dark hair, quick laugh, the kind of person who could talk to a stranger in a grocery line and somehow walk away with a new friend. We met in college at a mutual friend's game night. She beat me at Cards Against Humanity 3 rounds in a row, then stole my hoodie because it smelled like laundry and coffee, and that was basically it for me. We'd been married 8 years. People always say the first few are the hardest, but honestly, ours were pretty smooth. We weren't perfect. We argued about stupid things like whose turn it was to do dishes or why I never folded the laundry the right way. But we always ended the night on the same side of the bed, feet tangled under the blanket, talking about nothing until one of us drifted off. Sundays were our thing. Church in the morning if we felt up to it. Then brunch at this little diner where the waitress knew our order by heart. After that, we'd hit Costco, argue about whether or not we actually needed a 24-pack of muffins. We always did, apparently. Then head home and spend the afternoon on the couch, her reading a book, me watching the game with the sound low. It wasn't some big cinematic romance. It was more like a long-running show you love, familiar, comforting, full of small moments only you and the other person really understand. We wanted kids. That was part of the dream from the start. We tried for a while, and it didn't happen. Doctor appointments, awkward conversations, quiet tears in the bathroom when another test came up negative. It hurt, but we handled it the way we handled everything else. Together. We've still got time, she'd say, resting her head on my shoulder. And even if it doesn't happen, it's still you and me. That's enough. And I believed her. I really did. Our house looked like two people were building something real. Half-finished DIY projects, sticky notes on the fridge with dumb doodles, a calendar full of little plans. Dinner with friends, movie nights, reminders to call our parents. Out in the garage, I kept a dusty crib we'd bought secondhand just in case. Emily didn't know I'd kept it. I told myself I was being hopeful, not pathetic. We were that couple people pointed to and said, those two are solid. Friends came to us for advice. My younger brother actually called me once and said, you and Em, that's what I want one day. I remember hanging up and feeling this quiet pride in my chest. Like, yeah, okay, maybe I did something right. I trusted her completely. If you'd told me back then that one day I'd be scrolling through ride receipts and GPS routes, trying to figure out what happened between my wife and a guy who drove a gray Toyota Camry, I would have laughed in your face. Because in my head, there was no version of my life where Emily was anything but my person. Back then, the Uber app was just something we used when we didn't want to bother with parking downtown. Back then, a little car icon on her screen didn't mean danger. It didn't mean late nights and secrets and that feeling of your stomach dropping out of your body. It was just life. Ordinary, safe, warm. If I rewind the tape of my memory to before everything cracked, what I see is this. Emily in the kitchen, hair in a messy bun, humming off-key while she stirs pasta sauce. Moose snoring at my feet. My laptop open on the counter. Me thinking ahead, vacations we might take, a patio I wanted to build out back. How many years before we'd finally pay off the mortgage? I had no idea that beneath all that comfort, something was already shifting. That somewhere between shared Netflix passwords and grocery lists, a stranger in a rideshare app was about to drive straight through the middle of my life. But that night hadn't come yet. Back then, as far as I knew, I was a happy man with a happy wife and a happy home. And I had absolutely no reason to doubt her. If you told me my first real suspicion would come down to a notification on my wife's phone, I would have said you'd been watching too many crime shows. It started stupidly small. About 9 months ago, Emily began going out more. At first, it made sense. Her company had merged with another one, and there were all these team integration events, happy hours, late meetings, off-site trainings. She'd kiss me on the cheek, grab her purse, and say something like, "Don't wait up, okay? It might run late." And I didn't question it. Why would I? This was Emily, the girl who texted me pictures of her lunch just because she thought the salad looked fit for Instagram. The woman who used to call me on her way home, bored in traffic, asking what sounded good for dinner. But little by little, those calls stopped. Instead, I started hearing, "I'm just going to Uber. It's easier," more and more. At first it was practical. We'd both had a beer at dinner, or parking downtown was a mess. Then it was, "No, really, it's fine. They'll just grab an Uber," even when it was a 10-minute drive and I was literally standing there with my car keys in my hand. One Thursday night, she was getting ready for yet another work thing. I was on the couch, scrolling through my phone, half watching a basketball game. She came out of the bedroom in this dark green dress I hadn't seen in a while. She looked incredible. Like date night level incredible. "Wow," I said, sitting up. "If I'd known it was that kind of work event, I would have volunteered as your plus one." She laughed, but it didn't reach her eyes the way it usually did. "It's just the team, babe. Boring stuff. You'd hate it." She grabbed her phone, opened the Uber app, and I watched her thumb move quickly across the screen, almost too quickly, like she knew exactly where to tap without looking. "Let me drive you," I said. "I don't have anything going on. I can pick you up after, too." She didn't even look up right away. "No, it's fine. I already called it." That was the first time I noticed the way she said it instead of one, like the car wasn't random. Like it was a specific ride, a specific driver she was expecting. I brushed it off. People get comfortable with routines, that's all. But then patterns started stacking up. She'd come home late, smelling like a mix of perfume and someone else's cologne, not in a dramatic way, not drenched in it, just a faint trace. Once, I reached out to hug her and she flinched, just barely, then smiled too quickly and said, "Ugh, I'm so tired." Today was brutal. Her phone, which used to live face up on the coffee table, started living in her pocket. Notifications went silent. The lock screen preview disappeared. One weekend, while we were watching a movie, her phone buzzed. She grabbed it faster than I'd ever seen her move, glanced at it, turned the screen away from me, and said, "Spam." Spam texts at 10:47 p.m. On a Saturday? I joked. "Apparently," she said. No smile. Just tight shoulders and eyes glued to the TV. The real jolt came 2 weeks later. Emily had asked me to order us dinner on her Uber Eats account because she said she had a promo code. She shouted her password from the shower, and I logged in on my phone to grab the code from her email. Her Uber Eats and Uber rides were tied to the same account. I wasn't snooping. At least, that's what I told myself. I was just trying to find the promo. But once the app opened, the last few trips were right there on the screen. And they weren't what I expected. Multiple rides labeled work at 11:52 p.m. Dropped off at an address I didn't recognize, not her office. Then another labeled home, but the pickup point wasn't the bar Shed told me she was at. It was a street across town I'd never heard her mention. At the top of the screen, under your favorite driver, was a name I didn't know. Tyler, 4.98 rating, gray Toyota Camry. My stomach did this slow, cold flip. I clicked on the ride details. It showed a little line on the map, a route from some random apartment complex back to our house. Date and time. A Sunday afternoon. Shed told me she was running errands. That was the first time I felt it. This weird distance between what she was saying and what the screen was showing me. When she came out of the bathroom, towel around her hair, humming to herself, I shut off the app and locked her phone like I'd been caught stealing. "Did you find the promo?" she asked, rubbing lotion into her hands. Yeah," I said, forcing a smile. "All set." I could hear my own voice shaking, even though I was trying to sound normal. For the rest of the night, I watched her. Every laugh, every casual touch, every babe felt like it was under a microscope. And I hated it. I hated the version of myself that was suddenly questioning the woman I'd trusted with everything. The next few days were a tug-of-war in my head. "You're overthinking. She wouldn't do that. People use the same drivers all the time. Maybe she carpooled with a coworker who lives there. She told you she was at Target. Why would she lie about Target?" I started noticing gray Camrys everywhere. At stoplights, in parking lots, passing our street. ID checked the driver's face, my heart racing, wondering if that was him. If that was Tyler. If he knew my wife's Starbucks order. If had been down our street so many times our house looked familiar. I didn't have proof. Just a screen full of routes and times that didn't quite line up with the stories ID heard at dinner. And yet, underneath all my excuses, something small but sharp had lodged itself inside me. For the first time in 8 years of marriage, I looked at Emily and thought, what if you're lying to me? And the worst part wasn't the suspicion. It was how badly I wanted to be wrong. The night I found out for sure, it was because of a tiny green car icon moving on a map. Emily said she had another late team thing. Thursday again. Same excuse, different week. She stood in front of the mirror in our bedroom, putting on lipstick she almost never wore around me anymore. Moose lay at her feet, tail thumping every time she moved. You sure you don't want to ride? I asked from the doorway. She met my eyes in the mirror for half a second, then looked away. No, babe, it's fine. You hate downtown on Thursdays. I already called an Uber. There it was again. Not one. My stomach clenched. When she left, I waited. Not long, just enough for her to get down the stairs and out the door. I heard her say a quick, cheerful hey to someone outside. A man's voice answered, too low for me to make out the words. I picked up her old iPad from the kitchen counter. Same Apple ID. Same apps. I opened Uber. Her account was still logged in. There it was. Tyler, gray Toyota Camry. A little bar at the bottom of the screen said, on trip. I tapped it, and the map popped up. I watched that green car icon move away from our street, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The destination loaded a second later. It wasn't her office. It wasn't a restaurant, or a hotel downtown, or a conference center. It was the same apartment complex ID seen in the ride history. The one she'd gone to on that errand Sunday. Something inside me went very, very quiet. I grabbed my keys. I don't remember the drive, just that I turned the radio off halfway there because the noise made me feel like I was going to throw up. I kept checking the iPad at stoplights, watching the little car get closer and closer to that same pin on the map. When I pulled into the street across from the complex, I killed the headlights and parked along the curb. My hands were shaking. I told myself I was crazy, that I would see her get out, wave goodbye to some polite driver, and walk into a building where her co-workers were waiting with name tags and cheap beer. Instead, I saw the gray Camry. It pulled up near Building C. I recognized her silhouette before I saw her face. She was laughing at something the driver was saying. The door opened. She stepped out, adjusting her dress. Then he got out, too. He was younger than me, maybe early 30s. Ball cap, hoodie, jeans. Nothing special. Just a regular guy with a tired car and a high rating. Except my wife walked around the front of the car and met him on the sidewalk like they'd done this 100 times. I watched her lean in, too close for just a driver. He touched her arm. She smiled in that way I hadn't seen directed at me in a long time. Open, warm, like he'd just told the funniest thing she'd heard all week. They went inside together. No hesitation. No looking around. No see you later. Just two people walking into a building like they belonged there. I sat in my car, fingers digging into the steering wheel so hard they hurt. The world kind of blurred at the edges. I don't know how long I stayed like that, staring at the door they disappeared through. Part of me wanted to storm over there, bang on the door, and drag the truth out into the hallway. Part of me wanted to peel out and never come back. The part that won was smaller, colder. I drove home. Back in our quiet kitchen, the lights shed left on made everything look too bright. Moose wagged his tail at me, confused I was alone. I gave him a shaky pat and sat down at the table. My phone buzzed an hour later. Emily. Running late. Don't wait up, that little heart at the end almost broke me more than what I'd seen. When she finally came home, sometime past midnight, I pretended to be asleep. I heard her move around the room, the soft rustle of fabric, the faint click of her phone charging. The mattress dipped as she slid in beside me. She smelled like someone else's cologne and mint gum. My heart felt like a rock in my chest. The next day, while she was in the shower, I did what I'd been avoiding for weeks. I went through her phone. I wish I could say I didn't, that I was better than that. But I wasn't. Not anymore. The Uber messages weren't much, just the standard "I'm here" and "be right out." But there was a separate thread, a real number, not the anonymized one. Saved contact. Tyler. I opened it. There it was. Jokes. Memes. Little check-ins. Text me when you get home, so I know you're safe. You looked amazing tonight. Same time next week. Nothing explicit. Nothing you could print out and wave in court. But enough. Enough to know I wasn't crazy. Enough to know my wife had built a whole secret corner of her life with a guy whose job was supposed to be getting her from point A to point B. I stood there in the bathroom doorway when she stepped out, wrapped in a towel, steam curling around her. Everything okay? She asked, drying her hair like the world hadn't just shifted under my feet. Yeah, I lied. Everything's fine. But it wasn't. And as I watched her move around our bedroom like it still belonged to both of us, something dark and sharp started forming in my chest. I'd always thought of myself as a calm guy. Rational. Slow to anger. But right then, staring at the woman who had just texted another man that she had the best night, I started thinking thoughts I'd never had before. If she could build this secret life behind my back, maybe I could build something of my own. Not with another person. With a plan. A plan to make sure that if she wanted a life without me, she was really going to feel what that meant. Revenge didn't come to me like some big, dramatic movie moment. It started with a yellow legal pad and a pen. I sat at the kitchen table one Saturday morning while Emily slept in, the sunlight coming through the blinds in little stripes. Moose lay at my feet, snoring softly. I drew a line down the middle of the page and wrote at the top. Before on one side, after on the other. On the before side, I listed everything we had built together. House, cars, savings, joint account, my 401k, her retirement, the dog, the furniture, little stuff like the patio set ID put together in 95-degree heat because Shed wanted somewhere cute to drink coffee. On the after side, I left it blank. If she wanted a life that didn't include me, fine. But I wasn't going to be the fool who let her walk away with half of everything while she rode off in the sunset with a guy who knew our address from the driver's app. First step, a lawyer. I didn't tell anyone at first. Not my parents, not my friends, not my brother. I just searched divorce attorney near me, picked a name with good reviews, and sat in an office that smelled like coffee and printer ink while a woman in a navy suit asked me questions in a calm, steady voice. Do you have proof of the affair? She asked. I slid my phone across the desk. Screenshots of texts, ride histories, GPS routes, that apartment complex pinned over and over. She scrolled, lips pressed in a thin line. This is quite a bit, she said. Colorado is a no-fault state, but this can still be useful. How attached are you to the house? Very, I said, before I even thought about it. Then we build from there. Over the next few weeks, I became someone I barely recognized. Polite, distant, careful. I stopped asking where she was going. I stopped volunteering to drive her anywhere. I moved my direct deposit into an account with just my name on it. Quietly, one by one, I removed her as an authorized user from my credit cards. It felt cold. It also felt necessary. At home, I played my role. Husband on autopilot. I made dinner. I laughed at the right moments. I listened to her stories about work events, knowing exactly which apartment she'd been at an hour before. At night, when she fell asleep, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, mentally moving furniture in my head. If she left, the bed would stay. The couch would stay. The house would stay. She could pack her suitcases and her framed prints and that weird lamp she loved, but the foundation, the life, that was mine. The actual confrontation happened on a Tuesday. I came home early from work. She was in the kitchen, scrolling on her phone, a half-made salad on the counter. The TV was on in the background, some home renovation show. Hey, she said, distracted. You're early. Yeah, I said. We need to talk. Something in my voice must have given me away because she set the phone down slowly. Okay, about what? I didn't yell. I thought I might. In my head, I pictured shouting, accusations, the kind of scene that gets neighbors talking. Instead, I pulled out the folder my lawyer had helped me put together. I laid it on the table and opened it. Printed screenshots. Uber histories. A preliminary draft of a divorce petition. Her face went from confused, to pale, to something like anger. Mark, what is this? This, I said, my voice shaking but steady enough, is the last 3 months of your secret life with your favorite Uber driver. She stared down at the papers. Then she laughed, this short, disbelieving sound. You went through my phone. I followed the car, I said. I watched you go into that apartment. Eve seen the texts. Please don't insult me by pretending I'm wrong. The fight that followed was messy and painful, but not loud. More like two people taking turns stabbing each other with words. It wasn't serious. I was lonely, Mark. You were never home emotionally. Tyler listened. You could have told me that instead of sneaking around. It just happened. That phrase. It just happened. Like she'd tripped and fallen into two lives. At the end of it, she sat at the table, head in her hands. I felt wrung out, like someone had taken my insides and twisted them dry. So what now? She asked, voice small. Now, I said quietly, we stop pretending we're okay. Eve already talked to a lawyer. She looked up, stunned. You already? Yeah, I said. I'm not going to scream. I'm not going to throw your stuff out on the lawn. But I'm also not going to bankroll the next chapter of your life with someone else. I showed her the outline. How the house would likely stay with me. How my retirement was separate from hers. How, legally, she wasn't entitled to as much as she thought. It was brutal. Clinical. All the warmth sucked out of the room and replaced with percentages and signatures. Over the next 2 months, we unwound our lives like a tangled rope. She moved into a small apartment closer to downtown. Took her clothes, some furniture, her car. I bought out her share of what equity we had in the house, which wasn't much yet. She kept saying, I never thought you'd actually go through with this. I never thought you'd get into someone else's car and build a life behind my back, I answered once. It shut the conversation down. When the papers were finally signed, I walked out of the courthouse feeling empty. ID imagined feeling triumphant, or at least vindicated. ID protected what I could. On paper, she walked away with less than half of what she'd expected. But standing on those concrete steps, divorce decree in my hand, I realized something painfully simple. I hadn't really won anything. ID kept my house, my savings, my dog. Shed kept her freedom and whatever version of herself she'd been chasing. What we'd both lost was bigger than the stuff. A few months after everything was finalized, I was at the grocery store on a random Sunday, wandering the cereal aisle like a ghost, when I turned a corner and smacked carts with someone. Sorry, I said, stepping back. The woman on the other side laughed. No, that was totally my fault. I walk like the aisles are a racetrack. She had curly hair pulled into a loose ponytail, a faded Broncos hoodie, and the kind of tired eyes that still somehow looked kind. We made some small joke about decision paralysis in front of the cereal, then parted ways. I didn't think much of it until I saw her again at checkout, wrestling with a runaway apple that tried to roll off the conveyor belt. Still a dangerous driver, I said. She smiled. You again. Her name was Hannah. I didn't know it then, but that random collision of grocery carts was the first moment in a long time that didn't feel weighed down by the past. I just knew that, for the first time in months, I heard myself laugh, and it didn't sound broken. People talk about second chances like they show up with fireworks and a marching band. Mine started with a text that just said, Hannah, so, are you as bad at coffee shop parking as you are at grocery cart driving? I stared at it for a solid minute, sitting at my kitchen table, divorce papers still in a file drawer 10 feet away. Then I smiled, really smiled, for what felt like the first time in forever. Me. Worse. I consider it a full contact sport. When are we testing this theory? We met that Saturday at a little local coffee shop. Nothing fancy, mismatched chairs, handwritten menu, the smell of espresso and cinnamon. She was waiting at a corner table, hands wrapped around a mug, hair pulled back in that loose way again. I remember thinking, I don't know what this is, but I like the way it feels just to sit here. We talked for hours. Not the forced, first date small talk I remembered from my 20s, but the kind of conversation that just wandered. She was a nurse, divorced too. No kids. She loved hiking but hated camping, which I told her was un-American. She rolled her eyes and said, I like beds and showers. Put that in your notes. Eventually, the topic found its way to the scar tissue. So, she said gently, stirring what was left of her latte, how long ago did everything happen? I told her. Not every ugly detail, but enough. The Uber rides. The apartment. The papers. She listened, really listened, not with pity, but with this quiet understanding. When I finished, I felt exposed and weirdly lighter. I'm sorry, she said. That's heavy. I can't pretend to know exactly how that feels, but my ex and I ended badly too. Different reasons. Same kind of break. There was a long pause. Then she smiled, small but real. So here we are, she said. Two people who have been dropped from a great height, trying coffee again. Yeah, I said. Hitting the ground, checking for broken bones. Seeing if we still remember how to walk, she added. We laughed. It felt like breathing fresh air after months in a stuffy room. It wasn't some instant movie montage after that. It was slow, careful. Texts, walks, dinners, a shared playlist. A Saturday spent putting together a bookshelf at her place and realizing we worked well as a team, even when the instructions made no sense. I noticed something as we went along. I was different. I didn't automatically trust every silence anymore. When she'd say, "I'm staying late at work," that old fear would flicker for a second. But instead of swallowing it and pretending it wasn't there, I told her, "Hey," I admitted one night, sitting in her living room, Moose snoring between us, "I still get weird sometimes. Like when your shift runs long, my brain wants to write scenes that aren't real." She didn't get defensive. She didn't roll her eyes. She put her hand over mine and said, "Then we'll over-communicate. I don't mind texting you a little more. And if it ever feels off, I want you to tell me, not just carry it." It was such a simple thing. But to a guy who'd spent months doubting his own instincts, it felt huge. About a year after we met, I caught myself one evening standing in my garage, looking at that old crib ID bought back when Emily and I were trying. ID never gotten rid of it. Just pushed it into a corner, covered it with a tarp, like I could bury the hope along with it. That night, with the door half open and the summer air drifting in, I pulled the tarp off. The wood was dusty but solid. I ran my hand along the rail and thought, maybe this dream doesn't have to die. Maybe it just looks different now. When I told Hannah about it, I expected her to be weirded out. Instead, she smiled in this soft, surprised way. "You kept it?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "I know it's strange. I guess part of me didn't want to give up completely." She stepped closer, slipping her hand into mine. "Then maybe we clean it up," she said. "And if life goes that way for us, we'll use it. Not as some recycled plan. As part of our story." 2 years later, I was on the floor of what used to be my home office, hex key in one hand, crib instructions in the other, while Hannah, very pregnant, hair in a messy bun, wearing one of my old t-shirts, sat on the rug, laughing at me. "You're supposed to be the handy one," she teased. "I am handy," I argued, squinting at the page. "These drawings are just abstract art." Moose paced around us, tail wagging, not sure what all the excitement was about. Our daughter, Lily, was born on a rainy April morning. I will never forget the weight of her when the nurse settled her into my arms, or the way her tiny hand curled reflexively around my finger. I felt this rush, terror, awe, love so big it made my chest hurt. A year and a half later, her little brother, Caleb, arrived and turned the volume up on our lives even more. Our house doesn't look like the carefully arranged place Emily and I curated. It looks like kids live here. Crayon marks on the lower walls. A toy truck abandoned on the stairs. Finger paint masterpieces on the fridge. Tiny shoes lined up by the door next to my worn-out sneakers and Hannah's clogs. There are still hard days. Nights when the kids are sick and nobody sleeps. Weeks when work is exhausting and we snap at each other over nothing. Times when old fears creep in, quiet and uninvited. But now, when something feels off, we talk about it. Sometimes awkwardly. Sometimes in the middle of dishes or diaper changes. We make a point to say things out loud instead of assuming the other person can read our mind. We have this little ritual too. Once a month, after the kids are asleep, we sit on the back patio with 2 mugs of tea and ask each other the same 3 questions. What are you worried about? What are you grateful for? What do you need more of from me? Sometimes the answers are simple. Sometimes they're not. But they keep us honest. They keep us facing the same direction. Every now and then, you'll be driving and see a gray Camry in traffic. For a split second, my body still reacts. Heart jumping, hands tensing on the wheel. Then I take a breath, remind myself where I am. I'm not the man sitting in a dark car outside an apartment complex anymore, watching his life crack in silence. I'm the guy driving home to a house where a light is on in the kitchen, where a woman I love is humming off-key while she cuts up strawberries, where a little girl is proudly sticking stickers on the dog, and a baby boy is trying very hard to chew on a shoe. The Uber app is long gone from my phone. Not because ride shares are evil, but but because there was a day, a couple years back, when I realized I didn't need that particular ghost rattling around in my pocket anymore. I deleted it and didn't make a big speech about it. Just let it go. Sometimes, late at night, when the house is finally quiet, I think about Emily. Not with anger, not really. More with this distant kind of sadness for the people we were back then, trying to build something without knowing how fragile we really were. If there's a lesson in all of this, it's not never trust anyone. That's no way to live. It's something smaller and harder. Listen when the quiet things feel wrong. Say the hard stuff out loud. And when someone shows you they're willing to break what you're building, believe them, but don't let that be the last word on who you are. I look at my kids, at Hannah, at our messy, loud, ordinary life, and realize revenge was never the thing that was going to save me. Letting go was. Starting over was. Choosing, every day, to show up with honesty and a little courage. That's what turned the worst night of my life into the first chapter of a better one. And I'm still writing it.